In 2019, a chapter closed for Zombies fans as the Aether storyline came to an end and a new era began. An era built around the mysteries of the Dark Aether. But if the old story truly ended, why do we keep seeing familiar faces, classic weapons and enemies that feel ripped straight from that universe? I'm MysteryHQ, and in this video, we are going to discuss how the Dark Aether connects the old and the new zombie storylines. To understand the Dark Aether, first you need to deep dive into the lore, but for now, only into the essential lore, the stuff you need to get how the Dark Aether works and why it serves as the bridge between the old zombies mode and the new ones. At its core, the Dark Aether is known as the place below creation. Picture the universe like a stack of layers. At the top, you've got heaven or Agartha, in the middle sits our reality, and way below that, beneath everything else, there's the Dark Aether, basically hell. This is where the corrupted keepers were banished in the original storyline, slowly transforming into the Apothecons, who would later go on to wage a war against the keepers to control reality itself. Now here's where the things get a little bit off rails. At the end of Tag der Toten, the final map in the original storyline, the entire multiverse was wiped clean. The original zombie crew made the ultimate sacrifice, collapsing every broken, corrupted timeline into a single, clean, perfect state. But at what cost, you might be asking? The multiverse didn't just disappear. It was dumped inside the Dark Aether. They basically used it like a trash bin, tossing away everything we've seen so far. Only two people were chosen to enter the new perfect timeline, hand in hand, walking to the light. One was the child version of Dr. Edward Richtofen, Eddie, who would go on and became the director of Project Janus and Requiem in this new timeline. And the other was Samantha Maxis, who later in the story will sacrifice herself for the greater good, willingly banishing herself into the Dark Aether. But if this is supposed to be the perfect timeline, then why would she do that? How is the Dark Aether even a threat, you might be asking? This Dark Dimension isn't just some empty void, it's very much alive. It's the realm of elder gods and demonic entities, ancient beings of unimaginable power. And no matter where they come from, they all worship a single, mysterious object floating in the sky, the construct. No one knows what it truly is, but it has one purpose. It selects a champion, an Archon, to rule the realm. The Archon wields insane power, capable of shattering moons and commanding entire legions. This cycle of choosing a ruler has played out for eons, but after the purge of the multiverse, something changed. These beings started finding strange items, objects that don't belong in their world, artifacts from another reality, stuff like the Pack-a-Punch machine, wonder weapons and old perk machines. And through these relics, some of them realized they weren't alone. They tried to reach out, sending artifacts which ended up in the hands of ancient civilizations. Ancient civilizations, since at this point the universe had basically hit a hard reset. The multiverse collapsed and a brand new timeline began from scratch. And for a while, nothing major really happened within the Dark Aether nor outside of it. Not until World War II. In Poland, 1944, a Nazi experiment changed everything. At Project Endstation, scientists tore a hole into the Dark Aether itself as the result of the malfunction of the cyclotron, a particle accelerator. This tear reactivated 5 ancient artifacts, each bonded to an entity residing in the Dark Aether. And since this is where the story of Vanguard Zombies lives off, it's not really essential to our video. What's essential are the events at Project Endstation and how Nazi scientists discovered an element from the Dark Aether, Exo Element 1, later named as Ethereum. It's important to note that even though from the narrative standpoint, Ethereum and Element 115 from the original story serve the same purpose, they are not exactly the same. Element 115 corrupts the soul. The zombies in the old Aether storyline are fully aware of their actions, and as mentioned in many Easter egg songs, they all want to die. Ethereum on the other hand corrupts the mind. It steals the host's memories, turning them into an obedient part of a hive mind. Since everything was dumped into the Dark Aether, we can speculate whether Exo Element 1 is simply a corrupted and mutated form of Element 115 or a completely different element. There's no explicit explanation in the lore confirming their origins, So let me know what you think in the comments about this topic. But going back to Project Endstation, scientists started experimenting with it, trying to use Ethereum to turn their soldiers into undead. Basically, a supernatural backup plan to win the war. But that plan backfired kinda hard. The facility got overrun, consumed by Ethereum and the creatures brought with it. Almost a year later, the Red Army arrived and found Project Endstation crawling with the undead. In the final act of bravery, a sergeant named Kazimir Zykov fought his way to the core and shut down the cyclotron for good. But doing so, he trapped himself inside the Dark Aether. As mentioned before, Dark Aether is home to otherworldly beings and echoes from a long-forgotten past. It's usually depicted with a bluish-purple hue, a signature color of the dimension. The only time we see it drastically different is in Vanguard zombies within the corrupted lands, a red-hued zone unlike the usual Dark Aether. As the name implies, this isn't how it's supposed to be. The corrupted lands were once a thriving region, until a war annihilated all life, leaving behind a barren, twisted landscape. And far from this zone, a sergeant wandered for what felt like 400 years, nearly 40 years on Earth. That man was, of course, Kazimir Zykov. His fate changed when dimensional breaches reopened in the 80s, sparked by the global arms race between Omega Group and Requiem. While trapped inside, Zykov wasn't just surviving, he was evolving. Evolving because he consumed the power of elder gods and demonic entities. In his time wandering the Dark Aether, he found remnants of the original timeline, perk machines, the Pack-a-Punch, and he repaired them. But the Dark Aether remembers. Once Zykov projected these items into our world, they left a permanent imprint. Now they echo through every outbreak zone, surfacing again and again as tools for the players, all part of Zykov's greater plan, as he put it.
I even decided to help you. I gave you a fighting chance. Machines, perks, power-ups. What could you achieve with these tools at your disposal?
Most likely these echoes are the reason why we continue to see perk machines and the Pack-a-Punch even in places like Urzikstan long after Zykov, now known as the Forsaken, was defeated by Samantha Maxis. These machines have become permanent fixtures of any outbreak zone, bound to appear in one form or another. And if you may ask, why do we have new perks appearing? Consider them to be fragments of the old multiverse. If we take a look, for example, at the Wonderfizz, we can also see it has parts from the old original perk machines. So in short, while Zykov was trapped in the Dark Aether, he found and repaired remnants of the old world. Once he gained power as the Forsaken, he sent these tools into the new timeline, not to help us, but to further his own master plan. But it's not just the perks or the Pack-a-Punch machine that originate from the Dark Aether. There's a common misconception that all, or nearly all, returning Wonder weapons are salvaged from the Dark Aether. The truth is, only the ray gun variants we've seen so far have direct connections to that dimension. In fact, the ray gun Mark II is the first Wonder weapon in the Dark Aether storyline to be explicitly retrieved from the Dark Aether itself. Sam even mentions this on Shattered Veil. Richtofen had sent a team into the Dark Aether to discover the Mark II's origin, but they have never returned, which is kind of funny, considering that the Mark II's origin was always a mystery. Even in the original timeline, it was never clearly explained who created it. And you may ask, what about the normal ray gun? Well, that's also a mystery. Maybe it's just an echo, a remnant engraved into the mystery box appearing where it's needed. Even newer variants like the Ray K84 were built using blueprints found inside the Dark Aether, reverse engineered from forgotten designs like the GKZ45. If that name rings a bell, that's cause is the Ray Gun Mark III from Gorod Krovi from Black Ops 3. But you might be wondering, what about the other reused weapons? Are they similar? Do they have such reason to be present, or are they just reused content? Well, each of them has their own lore and creators within this new storyline. The Wunderwaffe DG2 was developed by Ulrich Vogel, but the prototype and calculations were made long before the Dimensional Rift was opened. The jet gun in the Dark Aether storyline is a makeshift weapon cobbled together by locals and Dr. Thanos during the Liberty Falls outbreak. The VR11 was created by Operation Deadbolt using Ethereum neutralizer technology, which was originally developed by Eva Jensen, and the Ice Staff has no such details about its origin, except it's not the same we see in Black Ops 2. As you can see, with all these gameplay mechanics, the Dark Aether gives Treyarch the freedom to bring back older, sometimes less popular items and tie them into the story either by reimagining them entirely or leaving them as they were. And the best part? Well, they are trying to make them make sense. These items are either salvaged from the Dark Aether as leftovers from the past, or they are echoes, memories set in stone in a way like they must be present in every zombie's universe. Although I know the last one sounds cheap. Now sure, some things still have no clear explanation, but that's part of what makes zombies special. The speculation, the mystery, that's a huge part why I personally fell in love with the mode years ago. It's easy to look at reused weapons, enemies, or assets and say, well, that's lazy. And to be honest, I feel that way sometimes too. I'm not always keen to see so much old content return. But credit where it's due, turning the Dark Aether into a narrative recycling bin, that's actually clever. It fits the story, it adds to the lore, and for longtime fans it might hit that nostalgia button just right. That said, it's also a tightrope walk, because if they start pulling back beloved gameplay elements like for example the Ice Staff and not including the other staff, it can cause some backlash. Like it may seem a little bit lazy or strip down of what made them iconic. Older fans might feel disappointed, while newer players are just excited to try something new, unaware of its legacy. And also this whole concept just feels like they don't want to leave the Aether story behind. But now I'm throwing some questions at you. What do you think the purpose of the Dark Aether really is? Is it justified as a tool to bring back and reimagine old ideas in this constant debate over reused content? Or it should just be a dark reflection of our timeline, like a threat that must be defeated in the lore? These questions are especially relevant now, as Black Ops 6 seems to hint that Treyarch is shifting focus, possibly setting aside the Dark Aether in favor of merging elements from the Chaos storyline into the mix. And while the Dark Aether remains a crucial part of the overall lore, we still haven't seen a map set entirely within the dimension. So far what we've gotten are either small original sections or recycled content from previous games used as the Dark Aether themed playable areas. And personally I think that's just not right. Like how cool it would be to see a map fully inside the Dark Aether, not only to expand its lore, but to see something truly original. But for now, as the old Dark Aether saying goes, I'm out of rabbits. So let me know what you think in the comments. If you don't want to miss the next episode of my Zombies video essay series, then please subscribe, and if you find this episode intriguing, then leave a like to support my work. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.